Welcome. I'm Jessica Tietjen, and this is the Evolving to Exceptional podcast, where we talk about reaching peak performance in our workplaces, homes, and communities so that we can live our best life possible, an exceptional life. I want to welcome back our Evolving to Exceptional listeners to this week's episode of the podcast. We have a fantastic guest who I am so excited to get to promote her new book that's coming out soon. She's going to tell us all about it. Her name is Rhoda Banks. She's a culture and inclusion executive, founder of the Rhoda Experience. She's an author, speaker, podcast host. She has a long history of amazing experiences in the space of people and performance and talent management. And I'm so excited to get to talk to her today about both her book and diving into a little bit of how trauma and trauma specifically in the workplace has an impact and how do we help leaders really understand that. But before we get into all of that, Rhoda, would you maybe introduce yourself a little bit, give us a little bit of your story and background and help our listeners get to know you a little bit?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Any opportunity I have to share and inspire others, I often say yes to those. I am, first of all, the name of my book, since you mentioned it, is Daughter of an Assassin. And yes, it's a true story. It is a memoir. And I'm the daughter of an assassin, both literally and figuratively. Turning pain into power is about a journey of faith and perseverance, and how we are often born into legacies and inherit legacies that perhaps if we had the opportunity, we would not have chosen. And how, despite the fact that you inherit a pattern of parenting or a situation or a circumstance or whatever the case may be, you can make a intentional choice to change that legacy, to make it be what you desire it to be. So that's the essence of the book. Underneath that, though, is parenting patterns. And my mom, who has passed on, who I love dearly, may she rest in peace, but she did the best she could as a mother based on how she was parented and raised. And so and my sisters and I were often, I believe, at least I'm speaking for myself, emotionally bankrupt because she never gave us, never told us she loved us, never gave us a hug, because she didn't have that. Again, it takes intentionality, it takes exposure to other situations and positive scenarios for you to wake up and see that you could choose something different. And unfortunately, she didn't, but despite all of the trauma and challenges that she went through and unfortunately passed down through her parenting, this book is about, so what? You can overcome those. And so it's meant to inspire. I grew up in low-income housing in the inner city of St. Louis, called Courtois Village. It's still there to this day. It was fraught with a lot of trauma, murders, gunshots, etc. But there are also lots of positives that came. And one is that I felt like I was related and connected to everyone that lived in our community. And I still feel connected to those individuals, and I felt loved and I felt seen for the most part. Everyone protected everyone unless you got on someone's bad side, and that's where all the trauma people came in. But that's where I grew up. And so despite the challenges that my mom had mentally, emotionally, etc., she wanted better for her 4 girls, and I'm the oldest of 4. And she found a church that was in our neighborhood. It was a Lutheran church, and they had programs that give you scholarships to go to the private Lutheran school. So she learned about that and got scholarships for us to go to Central City Lutheran School. I think that's pivotal in our trajectory of our lives, because that opened the door for us to meet teachers from different backgrounds and students from different parts of St. Louis who had different lived experiences, looked like us, but had different lived experiences. That led to me making friends with them. That led to me wanting to go to the same high school, which they were going to Private High School, Lutheran North, and she couldn't afford it. But something happened, and one day she started getting a Social Security check from me because my father was murdered when I was 5 years old, and we found out that my had filled out paperwork for all of his kids, and we all started getting checks. And she used that check to pay my tuition while I was in high school, so I got to graduate from Lutheran North. That experience exposed me to a life outside of the housing project. Typically, when you live in those areas, you do everything in the area. You shop in the area. I walked downtown. I worked at Burger King. I never really left the area, but when I went to Lutheran North, I got the opportunity to leave the area, spend the night with friends, go to different places. And I think that that was like the climate of what exposed me to more things in life. And she obviously wanted better for us. She just struggled to get us out of that environment, but she did through schooling. And I appreciate her for that.
I love a couple things that you said there. And first, I want to honor you for being willing to share such a vulnerable story about some really like family challenges and situations you went through. And I think it's interesting how sometimes we like to characterize things as all good or all bad. And I really loved how you talked about, there was a lot of protection and then there was a lot of bad things that also happened. And I think that that's probably true on all sides, right? And no matter where you grow up, and there's different degrees of different experiences, but there's good and bad within all of it. And so I love that you shared that. Can you maybe tell us? I'm curious about what I'm sure there were a lot of lessons, but if there's one in particular that is really important to you, and that you share in your book about what you learned through that experience and what you hope that people take away from reading your book.
Yeah. One of the things that became clear to me is that if you don't truly understand the journey and the struggle, you in the context around all of that, one may be tempted to think, oh wow, could someone ask me, well, how did you forgive your mother? And I was taken aback by the question because I didn't feel like I had anything to forgive. So one of the lessons that I've learned is that I need to be very intentional about putting up front. I'm not a victim, and my mom wasn't a victim either. And I didn't harbor any negative towards her because while you're living in that situation, it feels normal. You don't know it's traumatic until later in life, and you learn and you mature and you look back and you're like, wow, that was pretty trauma inducing with that experience I had. So the lesson for me is that I hope that others will read the book, that do read it or hear me talk about it. We listen and we don't judge. And so I wrote it from a place of emptying myself, getting all that out of me, sharing my story for others who might be walking a similar struggle or inherited some of the things I inherited or having to endure some of the things I endured so that they can have a glimmer of hope to say, you know what, if this person overcame all of those things, so can I. Um, so the lesson is that two things can be true. My mother was not the best loving mother that the world calls. She loved us, but she didn't know how to show outside of. She made sure we had food. She made sure we dressed cute. To this day, I still like to match my clothes and glasses and earrings because she always made sure we matched and the house was clean. To my knowledge, none of us ever violated. A lot of sexual abuse happens in homes. We've never experienced any of that. We witnessed her being physically abused by my stepfather, but we were physically abused. And so two things can be true. You can have a struggle, an issue with a loved one, but you can also love them. And so to me, that's the biggest in the story.
So who would you say is your ideal audience? Like if somebody's wondering, should I pick up this book? Who might benefit the most?
And someone asked me that question before, just and they was like, well, why should daughter of an assassin? Why should sons read it? I was like, sure, I bet sons, nephews, nieces, everyone probably has an assassin in their life or have had one. And it doesn't have to be a person. It can be a situation, a circumstance, etc. The book is meant for you to read it as though you're looking in a mirror. And so anyone that has had any type of struggle in their life, I believe there's something in this book that could resonate with them. But when I wrote this book, I was thinking about the little Rhoda. Doesn't matter their skin color or anything, where they grew up. The little Rhodas that was born into something that continues to haunt them and continues to impact the way they see the world and really the way they see themselves. Because I still struggle with some stories I tell myself. My friend calls it thinking. I still have these stories that I have to really work to reframe because of the way that I was brought up. So it's for anyone that has had any situation, whether it's a person, place, or thing, or circumstance that have impacted them in a way that they're still trying to struggle to break through and overcome that.
I love that. And I love that you talk about, when you talk about your mom and that relationship, the dichotomy of both things being true. And, something I didn't know or understand for a long time is how much those early attachments, those early relationships impact all future relationships, right? And it's more about how we interpreted and experienced them. So the same people in the same family can develop different styles or different impacts from it. But it really is about the actual experience, right? Or what are the person's intention.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I found interesting as I've coached and worked with people is that those experiences, those early, whether you call them traumas, big T, small t, whether you call them stressful experiences, however you want to characterize them, how those experiences then shape your workplace relationships, your life relationships, your experiences, and how you interpret different situations at work.
Yeah.
How have you seen that connection play out? Or how have you seen that maybe even in your own life of those experiences that you talk about and how maybe those have carried forward into, what you've noticed or what you've experienced in the workplace?
That is such a profound question. I'm simple.
And on that cliffhanger, we are going to pause and come back again next week with a additional episode where we dive into this topic of workplace trauma and how do we upgrade our systems to really address the human performance and really align with what we know about the neuroscience of human performance. So if you haven't already, go get Rhoda's book. It is available. We'll have the link in the show notes. And next week, we'll be back to talk with Rhoda again and get a little bit more into this topic. And you get to hear what her very profound answer is to this very interesting question. As always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I just want to remind you to always keep evolving, keep growing, keep rewiring those neural pathways so you can live your best life, an exceptional life. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be back again next week.